On today's show, we're looking at the Boston Celtics, the dynasty value from their raft of young players, what to expect in the future. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster and by Built Bar. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Make sure you are checking out Built Bar at builtbar.com and using the code Locked On for $10 off the best tasting protein bars you will ever taste. Today, we are looking at the Boston Celtics, looking at dynasty value of their players. There's a ton to talk about with Boston, so let's get straight into it. And of course, we'll start with a bloke who's already a real star, an all-star, and that is Big Jayson Tatum, who was, over the last stretch of time, the last 20 games in the NBA, a top 15 player, averaging 28 points per game, the 13th ranked fantasy player, 7.5 rebounds, 1.5 steals, a block, almost 4 triples, hitting 45% of his threes. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. Now, he's still sort of average in a number of categories, but what he's been able to do this season, which elevated him from a guy that's never been a top 60 player in his first 2 seasons, to where he's on the fringe of top 20 now and is going to be top 15 moving forward, is that the steal numbers have gone from average to really good. 1.5, from 1 to 1.5 is a big leap, and that's where we're at with him. The rebounds have gone from 5 or 6 to 7 or 8. It's a big difference. The threes have gone from one. He literally hit 1.5 threes per game last season. He's at 3 per game this year, and almost 4 over the last 20 games. The scoring went from a thoroughly average 16 points to almost 28 points over the last 20 games. Just huge leaps, a massive jump in usage, a massive jump in true shooting percentage, a massive jump in free throw attempts. And so often I talk about it, getting to the line, that big free throw attempt increase is what differentiates a good fantasy player from a star. And Tatum took that leap forward. And there's no reason to think that he can't continue to be good. Now, will he continue? Oh, no, excellent. Now, will he continue to be a 45% three-point shooter like he has been over the last 21 games? Probably not. But I think we can look at him as a 40% three-point shooter fairly comfortably. And if that means then he's a 24-point per game guy with 3 triples per game, with 7 rebounds, with 1.5 steals, with a block, all that equals top 15, potential top 10 upside. Now, after his rookie season, where I was critical of people really jumping on his deck, he's a 50% three-point shooter, he will be able to continue this. And it was obviously bullshit. But all of the advanced numbers looking at Tatum said this guy has top 10 upside as we move forward. It didn't happen last year, but absolutely we're there at the moment. And we should be looking at this guy in terms of dynasty production, dynasty value, at the very least, a top 15 player, at the very least. But probably I'd be valuing him as a top 10 player. He's got MVP type upside, all NBA type value, and those things that we talked about where he's strong in those numbers. He just needed to bump a couple to be elite. Threes, free throw attempts, scoring, all elite now. Steals have come up, and the next part of his game, if that can improve, and that's assists, go from 3 a game. And he's already taken it from 2 to 3. If that goes from 3 to 5, like a Kevin Garnett, Larry Bird level of out of position passing, in the top 10, forget about it. It's already done. And I'm not sure he's there yet. I'm not sure he's really going to be able to get to that spot in terms of the passing. But realistically, this is a guy we should be valuing as a top 10 guy, pretty clearly as we move forward. Now, will I draft him in the first round for next season in non-dynasty drafts? Probably not. But he's a clear second round guy. And when we're talking about dynasty, he is 22 years of age. So you've got 6-7 years left of peak value with, I reckon, multiple top 10 seasons mixed in there. So Jayson Tatum, absolutely ridiculous step forward this season from him. And I think there's probably a little bit more to come. So that would be awesome if you do have happen to have him in dynasty. He leads his team in PIPM very, very comfortably at a plus 4.38. That is significantly higher than anybody else, and he is going to get himself a max extension coming up very, very soon. I'll tell you what else should be getting a max extension, and that is the protein bars over at Built Bar. The taste of those bars is absolutely amazing. Not only just the taste of one bar, but multiple bars, multiple flavors. You can get yourself a mixed box, which gives you 18 bars with 15 different flavors to try them all. Look how good these look. The banana nut bread, mint chocolate cream. Now, some people don't like mint and chocolate. You people are fools. Mint and chocolate, fantastic. Salted caramel, vanilla chocolate cream. That's a fantastic one. They also have a dedicated nut-free range for those of you who have nut allergies, processed at a nut-free facility. Built Bar provides you great taste, the best tasting protein bars you can find. High protein, low sugar, low calorie. I don't know what more you could ask for in your protein bar. In fact, I'll tell you what more you could ask for. How about $10 off? And that's exactly what Built Bar is giving all listeners to this podcast. Go to builtbar.com, make your first order, and use the promo code LOCKEDON. You get $10 off. That is a whopping chunk. We're talking about 20-25% off the total cost of one box of bars. That is huge. Go to builtbar.com, use the promo code LOCKEDON, support our sponsors, get yourself a fantastic tasting box of protein bars as well. All right, let's talk about some other Boston Celtics blokes. Let's talk about the hi-fi.
JB, you've done it again.
Jaylen Brown, who, let's be honest, was not a good fantasy player. He just wasn't. Ranked 326th in his rookie season, 141st in his second year, despite playing 31 minutes, 182nd last year, and this season, bang, 57th. What happened? Well, like Tatum, the usage went up. 21 up to 25. That's not as big of a leap as Tatum, but it did go up. But importantly, the true shooting went up. He went from a sub 70% free throw shooter to not a brilliant, but a 74% free throw guy, although that did tail off at the end of the season. But what he also did is his rebounding went up, his three-point volume went up, his scoring went up, his free throw attempts went up. All of that stuff improved. Now, he's not anywhere near the level of a fantasy prospect of Tatum. He doesn't have that level of high usage, that level of efficiency across the board. He doesn't do one thing particularly well. He's never been a high steals guy and wasn't, again, he's average in that category, not fantastic. The assists aren't there. The volume of threes isn't great, but still 20 points per game, 6 rebounds. That's really strong with 2 threes. There's still some holes in his game. Can he get better from here? Or more importantly, I guess, where does he get better from here? It was big to see him take these steps forward. The obvious one that stands out is free throw percentage. If he can take that from 74, and again, over his last 15 games, he was back to 68, so it's a little bit of a worry. But if he can take that to 80, then that bumps him another 10 spots at least. And then he needs to bring his good on-court defense and translate it into good actual fantasy defensive value. Because he's not there yet. Now, his PIPM was not that good. Defensively, he was a negative. He was at plus 0.6, which is like 7th or 8th on the Celtics. Not a great number. He does not have the upside of a Tatum. I think he still can become maybe an all-star caliber player. I think he can top out as maybe a top 40 guy, but there are those significant holdbacks, and that's 4 seasons of below average free throw shooting that he's had so far. Despite the improvements this season, it's still below average. The three-point shooting at 38 is encouraging as well, but his volume is not absolutely out of this world. So there are, I guess, some concerns that hold him back from being a top 30 player, but I think we look at him now with the steps forward that Jaylen has taken in his 4th season to be a top 100 guy, which he never was in the past, and he made those changes. He got that scoring up. He improved his free throws, and almost more importantly, he improved those rebounding numbers and the three-point volume, which were really holding him back in terms of his overall fantasy value. So Jaylen, I think we look at him as 57th ranked player this season. I wouldn't be surprised if he never became a top 40 guy, but I think we can have multiple seasons between 50 and 90, and so much of it is going to swing on what that free throw percentage does. If it goes from 74 to 80, then he is 40th. If it goes from 74 back to 68, then he's 80th. And that's really the big thing there. Out of these other numbers, I don't go, well, I see Jaylen becoming a 25 point per game guy. I see him becoming a 4 assist player. I don't see any of those things for him. So not to say that he's peaked, because there's still improvement that can come, but it is really going to come to me down to the swing skill of that shooting. Let's talk about some guys who aren't anywhere near as established now, and let's go on to the Rock DJ, Robbie Williams, who everyone loves. Right? People love him. Oh, he's got a cool nickname. He's the Time Lord. He comes in and blocks shots. But let's just be serious about a few things. He's not that good at this point. It's 2 years in. Every opportunity that he seems to get, it doesn't work out. He can't stay on the court for long minutes, but when he goes out there, the per minute numbers are strong. This season, 11 and 12 with 3 blocks per 36 minutes, 68% from the field. Like, that's pretty good. Mainly the blocks and field goal percentage, and 2.2 steals per 36. Last year, 5 blocks per 36, so it is down, and that happens with young players. They become a bit smarter, and the block rate drops. But still, he has a lot of concerns, defensively and offensively, even though, look, his PIPM it's actually higher than Jaylen Brown's this season, which is a little bit of a surprise.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
He's never going to be able to stretch the floor. Does he have enough smarts to be a guy that sets screens and rolls hard? I'm not sure. He can be a good finisher, but is he a guy that fits into a smart offense? I guess that's where the concern lies with him. Now, if all that shit can come together, then that high field goal percentage, high block rate combination is really intriguing, as well as high rebounds. But what are the odds of it ever coming together? Daniel Tice has been fantastic in this system. Not to say that he is a young player necessarily, Tice. Tice is 28 years of age. Williams, they, I think, want to become their starting center, and that might be 2 or 3 years away. But to me, he is never going to be a 30-minute-a-night player. He might be a 25-minute-a-night guy at best case scenario, and they use his patchwork, other guys around him. But in 25 minutes a night, he can be useful and block 2 shots and be 65% from the field and grab 7 rebounds. That's all possible for Williams. But I don't see him as a can't miss prospect that's just waiting for his opportunity. I think there are too many. I don't want to say IQ because it sounds harsh, but does this guy actually get in the right spots, and does he make fewer mistakes? I think that's what we need to see from the Rock DJ, to get in there and to make fewer mistakes and stay on the court longer and keep control of his fouls and his errors and his positioning problems and all that. And he's still only really young. Like, he's still, 22? Yeah, he's still only 22. 2 years in the NBA. He averaged 4 and 5 with 1.2 blocks. So there's pieces there. So you're definitely not giving up on him in Dynasty, because it only takes 20 minutes for him to be a top 100 player. Like, I think pretty comfortably, give him 20 minutes and he's in that top 100 mix. But getting there consistently is going to be the concern. And of course, he had that injury this season, which did bother him quite a bit. The next bloke is someone that I love, and that is Grant Williams. Now, we've seen Williams play 62 games this season, 16 minutes a night, only 3.5 points. He didn't hit a 3 for what felt like the first 2 months of the season, but then did start to come on and start to hit them. Half a steal, half a block in 16 minutes. They're not great numbers, but again, they do translate out to 1 and 1 per 30 minutes. But unlike Robert Williams, Grant Williams is a player that when he's on the court, good shit happens. He is able to be part of a winning team. Now, offensively, there's a lot of issues. His defensive PIPM for a rookie is massive, 0.76. That's really good for a rookie. Offensively, there were some big struggles. But I think that he should be looked at as a starting power forward of the future. He's a guy that put up crazy numbers in college with good three-point shooting, really good defensive numbers, rebounded pretty strongly, passed the ball well. I think that there is still a lot of untapped potential here in Grant Williams to become a really good high-minute player, like a 29, 30-minute player. I think of Grant Williams as his absolute best-case scenario, Paul Millsap. But that best-case scenario is a top 12 player. That's what Millsap became. Now, do I think Williams gets there? Probably not. But Millsap wasn't a good shooter or an offensive player or even a starter for his first 4 or 5 years in the league in Utah behind Carlos Boozer. Then he came in and developed all this stuff and was already a good defender and a good communicator. And the passing came and the three-point shooting came. And that's how I view Grant Williams. So to me, if I'm looking at these players and go, who's an undervalued player on this Celtics team for Dynasty? Unless it's a Celtics fan, it probably is going to be Grant Williams. I think he's average per 36 numbers are shitful. 8 points per 36 is rough. 0.8 threes is rough. 6 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, 1.2 blocks. True shooting 51. Like, it's all rough. 25% shooting, rough. But over his last 25 games, 32% from 3. That's stepping up. I think we're 3 or 4 years away from it. But he is a guy that in 3 or 4 years' time, come back in 2024, he's a starting power forward. He's playing 31 minutes a night. He's a top 100 guy, probably a top 80 guy. That's how highly I value Grant Williams. And again, you don't have to pay anywhere near that amount to get him in any sort of dynasty format at this point. It's about trying to look forward. Now, he's not the youngest of players. He's 21 as a rookie. Like, he's not 18 or 19, but he's only 21. Like, that's not super old. By the time he's 24 or 25, I think we see him as a starter, as a top 100 guy who could potentially push even higher than that. So I really, really like what Grant Williams can do. Tremont Waters, second-year player. Second round draft pick, first-year player. We didn't see much from him as a guard. 22 years of age, 10 games, 9 minutes a game. But there was that one game which really opened my eyes for him. And he came in and played a big role and looked good in doing it. There was a couple of games where he had 4 points in 17 minutes. He had another one where he had 5 points in 16 minutes, just playing a big role. Even on opening night, he played 20 minutes and had 7 points. Now, these are all small things where you go, well, that's not all that spectacular. But just him being out there, I thought looked good. In the G League, really good. 18 points, 7 assists, 2 steals, 2.5 triples and 35%. Good free throw numbers, like really strong stuff. Massive positive defensively as well, which is always a surprise for a young, undersized guard, which Waters is, 5'10". And that's the concern you have, is the size. But in terms of valuing him versus a guy we're going to talk about later, like Carson Edwards, I think Waters is significantly the better option, the better prospect, to at least find himself into a solid enough backup point guard role where he plays 20 minutes, has 5 assists, 1.5 steals, and is generally a positive and doesn't screw things up for your team when he's out on the court. And what more can you ask for than a guy that comes in and doesn't screw up your team? And I think that's exactly what we're going to see with Tremont as we move forward. It's not probably going to be, look, we've got Brad Wanamaker there at the moment, Marcus Smart's playing backup point guard, but we're talking about in a situation moving forward in a couple of years' time, like where can Waters go? What is his upside in the NBA? I think he can have a top 200 season. I think he can. Could he have a top 150 season? Maybe. That's probably pushing it a little bit. But I don't think it's completely outrageous to see him in a role where he's playing enough minutes to get to that level. The next guy we talk about is Javonte Green. Green, a player that honestly not many people would have even paid any attention to before this season. He played 44 games, 9 minutes a game, 3 points, half a steal, 50% shooting, 26% from 3. I include him here because it is his first year and because he was a rotation player for majority of the season. I don't really see much from Javonte Green in terms of being a future rotation contributor. He's, as I said, already 26. A guy that played some 2, some 3, some 4 for this team. I don't see it for him as being someone where I want to invest and go, well, okay, Javonte is going to build on this and he's going to become this solid player. I just don't really like that. I don't really like what we've seen necessarily from him so far this season, enough so that I go, well, he's got to be ahead of this bunch of other players who have obviously shown a significant amount more. Now, defensively, I think he's been pretty good. He can hold up defensively, but it's the offensive stuff, the sub 30% three-point shooting that's a concern. Does he rebound? Does he assist? What does he actually do? That's a decent enough positive, and I'm not sure that those things are there, unfortunately, for him. The next bloke's been around the system for a bit, but we'll talk about him anyway. Semi Ojeleye, who is the 407th ranked player despite playing in 61 games and almost 15 minutes a night. He just doesn't do anything from a fantasy point of view, and he's not someone that we should be getting really having any interest in from a fantasy point of view. In fact, he is the worst player on this team. Let's try again. The second worst player on this team in PIPM is a negative 3.04. His offense is absolutely rough. Now, his defense is pretty good, but it doesn't generate anything fantasy-wise. He is one of the worst fantasy players in the entire NBA. I don't see anything changing. He might be able to remain a rotation guy for a couple of seasons, but I don't believe that it will be much past that. I think he's had opportunities. He's looked okay at times, but I don't really look at Ojeleye as anything more than a guy that comes in, he's got a big ass, and that's all cool, and he goes in there and chucks his weight around and does some things, but overall, the lack of offensive ability or even defensive game-changing ability is going to force him out for somebody else to come in and take that spot. Carson Edwards was one of the talks of Celtics Summer League. Went out there, had no hesitation in pulling up and bombing threes, and people were talking about him, man, he's going to be awesome. Even I bought into it a little bit. I said, well, okay, maybe he's going to be in this rotation straight away. He's been trash. Like, he was not good in the games that he played. He cannot hold up defensively at all. He was in the rotation to start off, and he had that game against the Wizards where he had 18 points in 20 minutes, hit 4 threes, and people's wrists were falling off from the speed of the Dutch rudders that were going on over Carson Edwards. Since then, he hasn't scored in double digits. He's been back into the G League, and he just hasn't been good. He is the worst player on this team for PIPM, and it's not because of his defense. And that's, I guess, somewhat of a surprise. He shot 33% from the field, 31 from 3. And those numbers will come up, but he just struggled to do anything. Never came in as a good passer or a good defender. He came in as a guy who we thought could hit threes, and the low shooting percentage at Purdue, we go, well, that's because he's carrying the offense and because he's forced to take bad shots. He's not carrying the offense in Boston. He's not forced to take bad shots, yet he still is. And the shots still aren't going in. So that is a massive concern. Yes, I think 2 years ago it was at Purdue where he hit a good percentage of his threes. This is 2 years in a row where shit just isn't working. Now, in the G League, he's only played 13 games. But guess what? 28% of his threes there as well. 22 points. That's encouraging. Now, the usage is high to get him to that level. 29%. Only 3 assists. The 1.8 steals, but just rough shooting numbers. You need to do more than that in the G League. I think that Edwards is firmly behind Waters, firmly behind the bloke that I'm going to talk about next as well in terms of guard pecking order on this team, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is off this team and out of the NBA really soon. So I think we saw those flashes in Summer League that got people excited. The concerns I had with him been massively apparent now during the season. The lack of assists, the poor defense, the undersizedness, the poor shooting, like that's all come out and been pretty clear at the moment. And I worry about what that means for his future. Let's talk about the Celtics' first-round pick, or their first-round pick this season. The last guy I'm going to talk about here, Romeo Langford. We just didn't see Langford play in the NBA really for the first, 2 months of the season. Then he came in and had a little stretch, and really we haven't seen much of him at all. He had one big offensive game against the Hawks, 16 points in 29 minutes with 3 blocks. Great. He played 28 minutes the night before that and had 6 points. He is the worst fantasy player on this team this season, the 449th ranked player. 2.6 points, shooting 38 and 70 from the line, 22% from 3. And like Edwards, we looked at Langford and go, well, okay, he shot absolutely shithouse at Indiana. Was it his wrist? Is that the problem? And then he comes in and shoots 22% from 3 here. So maybe it wasn't the wrist. What did he do in the G League in his 7 games? He shot 22% from 3, 43% overall, average 11 points. Rough. Like, that is rough. But his defense was really good. And that is huge from a rookie guard. Like, really good. Offensively, a disaster at this point. But defensively, he can hold up. I'd like to give him another 2 seasons or so just to see what happens with the shot. Can he become any sort of facilitator? I have massive doubts. Didn't do it in the G League. Didn't do it at college. Hasn't done it here in the pros. And it's going to make him a bad fantasy player. Is he a good free throw shooter? Apparently not in the NBA. He did hit 80% in the G League, but only 1 attempt per game is very low. So while he might come in and be the Celtics' new guard version of Shemi Ojeleye, come in there, throw his weight around, be really good defensively, but offensively, fantasy-wise, he's not there. He's nowhere near there. He's actually a real long way away. To be more positive on him, it profiles very similar to Jaylen Brown, who came in and did some good things on the court, but the fantasy numbers were terrible. And it took Jaylen 3 years to get to a very good level. And Langford's got to play behind Jaylen, and he's got to play behind Tatum. So getting those minutes is going to be tough. He's not anywhere near the prospect that Jaylen was. He didn't have anywhere near the rookie season that Jaylen did. And there are way more concerns. The shooting is really, really terrible from him at this point. So while if I had Langford in a Dynasty league, I would try and find the Celtics fans in my league, because there are a lot of them that really believe in him. And I think he can be a strong rotation player, a 7th man, a 20-minute-a-night guard that might push into 25 minutes a night, but I don't think it's going to become good from a fantasy point of view. What is he going to do well? Will he ever be a 20-point-per-game guy? Probably not. One thing he does do is block shots at a pretty high level. And as a guard, that's something that's, I guess, got value. We've seen Danny Green and John Wall have value in that. Josh Richardson do that. But will he get 30 minutes a night to get to 0.8 blocks to be that useful in that area. In the G League, 1.6 blocks per game. Like, that's a massive number. He had that 3-block game against the Hawks, as I mentioned. Like, that's impressive. So the defensive stuff is really strong, and he did bring some defensive numbers. We're talking about a season where he had 6 blocks in the NBA. Like, it's not big. It's not massive. So I'm not ready to say, well, this is going to be what he does moving forward. But at least showed I think he can be a rotation guy and hang defensively. The big questions we have here are offensively, and they were very similar to the questions I had with him heading into the NBA. And he hasn't dispelled that from me. I think we look at him as a best case scenario high-end backup who probably never cracks the top 150 for fantasy, would be my guess for Romeo Langford. Could very well be wrong. Happy to be proven wrong on all of these guys, but that's sort of how I'm seeing him at the moment. That'll do it for me today, guys. Don't forget, check out our sponsors, Built Bar. Go to builtbar.com, promo code Locked On, and don't forget, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on YouTube. Give me a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.